Hey everybody, welcome back to Swift Lessons for another rhythm guitar tutorial. As a follow-up to my previous lesson, breaking down common movable shapes rooted off of the low E string, in today's lesson, we're going to be learning a wide variety of shapes, this time rooted off of the A string. We're going to get started with these very common bar chord shapes before getting into these very spicy jazz blues shapes. I got a full PDF study guide waiting for you at patreon.com/swiftlessons. Support the channel there and gain access to a ton of extra resources for all my popular YouTube guitar lessons. Now, let's get started. Okay, a close look at the fretboard, getting started with section 1 of this lesson, common bar chord shapes. Now, before we jump into learning the chords, the first thing I want you to know is that these harmonies, or these chords, are being built from the major scale. We're going to be doing everything in the 5th fret position, key of D. Okay, there's the major scale in 1 octave. We also have the 2nd octave right above it. Now, those notes can be labeled by number. We call those intervals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then it repeats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You combine certain intervals together, for example, the 1, the 3rd, and the 5th, finding the 3rd and the 2nd octave, and we have a major chord. Okay, now, these notes inside the scale can be manipulated by flattening or sharpening them to create chords like D7. Okay, so the takeaway there is that the notes inside the major scale are building blocks for chords, and they also serve as a reference point for those chords that feature notes that are outside the scale. Okay, so with that in mind, let's jump into our first chord, a garden variety D major bar chord. Okay, so this is basically just taking an A major chord in the open position and then transposing it up to the key of D and then dropping the bar down. So I'm barring the A string to the high E string, then I'm setting up that A shape. I've got the 7th fret D string, the 7th fret of the G string, and the 7th fret of the B string. My thumb is nice and low, so that way my index finger straightens. I'm pulling back with both arms and pressing my chest into the guitar for a little extra pressure. All right, a garden variety D major chord shape. Now, let's take a look at the intervals. We can see that this bass note right here, that D note on the 5th fret of the A string, is the root, or the 1. Then right here on the 7th fret of the D string, that's the 5th note of the scale, so it's the 5th. All right, then looking at the G string 7th fret, that's going to be the octave of the root. So that's just another 1 or an 8, same thing. All right, and then on the B string, that's going to be the major 3rd, because looking at the 2nd octave of the scale, 1, 2, 3, it's always good to sing when you're practicing. All right, so that's the 3rd note, or the major 3rd of the key. Then finally, looking at the high E string, 5th fret, which is covered by the bar, that's going to be the octave of the 5th. Looking at that 2nd octave of the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so there you have it, a regular D major bar chord shape. We have the 1, the 5, the 1 again, the major 3rd, and the 5th. All right, so now you know the anatomy of a basic major chord. Okay, now moving on to the next shape, we're going to take that major 3rd and drop it down 1/2 step, thus making it a minor 3rd. Okay, so D major becomes D minor just by taking the 3rd note and flatten it back a 1/2 step. All right, so same thing, barring the 5th fret, A string to the high E string, we're setting up this minor shape, which is just a little A minor chord transposed to the key of D. All right, so we've got 7th fret D, 7th fret G, the 6th fret of the B string, and with the bar, that 5th fret high E. Okay, a standard D minor bar chord shape rooted off of the A string. All right, now on to chord number 3. This one is going to consist of the 1, the 3rd, the 5th, and the major 7th. The 7th note of the D major scale. It's going to be D major 7. I love this dreamy sounding chord. Okay, so bar in the 5th fret, A string to high E. This time we have the 7th fret D string, the 6th fret G, and the 7th fret of the B string. Okay, that gives us the intervals 1, 5, major 7, 3, and then 5 again. Okay, a D major 7 chord. Okay, so now you have 3 chords to practice. A regular D major chord, a common D minor, the D major 7. All right, now moving on to chord form number 4. All you need to do is take the middle finger away. That's going to flat the 7th note of the scale and turn it into D dominant 7. Okay, so this chord consists of the 1, the 3rd, the 5th, and the flatted 7th. You find them inside the chord, and we have 1, 5, flat 7, major 3rd, and 5. D dominant 7. Okay, now, just as we did with the major chord, we're going to flat the major 3rd found on the B string, turn it minor, and we have chord form number 5, a D minor 7 chord. Okay, for these chords, it's very helpful to take the hand away, wiggle the fingers out, all right, get some blood flow back to those fingers, and then slowly put the chord back together again, just to build that muscle memory and relieve a little bit of tension. Okay, another thing you can do is put the bar down first, and then practice taking these other fingers on and off the fretboard. That's actually a very cool rhythm trick for this D minor 7 chord. Okay, so D minor 7 and a very cool rhythm guitar trick. Okay, we have 2 more chords we want to learn for section 1. The first one's going to be D sus 2. Okay, a very cool chord. It's neither major nor minor. It's suspended. Okay, basically what we've done here is we've taken the major chord, removed the pinky, turning the major 3rd to the 2nd note of the scale. So if we look at the scale in the 2nd octave, right there, that 2nd note is on the 5th fret of the B string. You add that into the chord, and we have this very cool D sus 2 chord. Okay, so far you have the D major chord, the D minor, the D major 7, the D dominant 7, the D minor 7, and the D sus 2. Now, we're going to learn D sus 4. So basically, we're going to add in the 4th note of the scale in the 2nd octave, and that's going to give us this really cool sound. Okay, very much like Pinball Wizard by The Who. I've got the bar, I'm grabbing the 7th fret of the D string, 7th fret of the G string, and my pinky is on the 8th fret of the B string. Okay, remember to know your intervals. We've got the 1, the 5, the 1 again, and the 4. Of course, on the high E string right here, 5th fret, we have the 5 again as well. All right, this is a tricky chord. It definitely takes some hand strength, so if you can't get it right away, just remember you gotta keep with these things, keep practicing them, just that way you can build up the strength in your hand. Then you'll start hearing these notes coming through, nice and clear. Okay, excellent work everybody. You now have 7 chords to practice: the D major, the D minor, the D major 7, the D dominant 7, the D minor 7, the D sus 2, and the D sus 4. Now the cool thing about the guitar is the golden rule. What works one place works every place. So if you have D major here, you move it up to, say, the 10th fret, and you have G major. Okay, you can just move these up and down the fretboard to play every single variety of these chords in every single key. All right, so try mixing it up a little bit. Maybe start off playing some sus chords here in the key of D. You can try adding the major 7th to the 10th fret. All right, for a G major 7 chord. And you can take the dominant 7 right up to the 12th fret for an A dominant 7. Put that together and we have. All right, a great progression using these chord shapes. Okay, very well done everybody. With section 1 complete, you've learned 7 must-know bar chord shapes. Now jumping into section 2 of this lesson, we're going to focus on jazz blues grips. Okay, so these are non-bar chords. In the first half of this section, we're going to learn major consonant varieties. Then in the second half, we're going to get into some minor dissonant varieties. Okay, taking a look at these major or consonant varieties, here we're going to learn the D7 in its C shape, the D9 variety, one of my personal favorites, invaluable for blues music. We're also going to learn the D major 9. We'll learn how to play the D6 chord, and one of my personal favorites, the D6 add 9, which sounds so beautiful as you start moving it up to higher keys. Okay, so that first shape is the D7 chord in its C shape, essentially just taking a C7 chord and then moving it up a whole step. So C7, C sharp 7, and D7. Here we have the 1, we have the major 3rd, and then we have the dominant 7, which we can see by playing the major scale in the position that we played before. So 1, 2, 3, so there's the 1 and the 3rd, and then this is going to be the flat 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, flat it back, gives you D7. Now, over here, on the 3rd fret of the B string, we're just playing the octave of the 1. That gives us D dominant 7. Okay, now let's add a spicy little blues chord to your arsenal of chords. This is a D9 chord shape. Of course, actually, every single 9 chord in the book. All right, so in the 5th fret position, it's a D9 chord shape. I've got the root note, or the 1. I've got the major 3rd right there on the 4th fret of the D string. And I have the flatted 7th note right there on the 5th fret of the G string. And actually, my ring finger is barred. So with that ring finger, I've got the dominant 7, the 2, which we can also call the 9 if it's in the 2nd octave. And then the high E string 5th fret, as we learned before, is the 5th scale degree in the 2nd octave. Okay, so we have D9, 5th fret A, 4th fret D, 5th fret G, 5th fret B, and 5th fret high E string. D9. Okay, and with this shape, you can actually play a full blues progression, just like this. Just by playing this chord in the 5th fret position, that's the 1 chord, then the 10th fret position, that's the 4 chord, and also the 12th fret position, that's the 5 chord. So 1, 4, 5 progression to play a full 12-bar blues if you would like. Okay, now moving on to the next jazz blues shape, we're going to play a D major 9. This chord's going to look and sound like this. Okay, a very soothing chord shape. So, I've got my middle finger playing the root note, the 5th fret of the A string. I've got my index finger playing the major 3rd, 4th fret of the D string. My pinky's playing the major 7. That's the 6th fret of the G string. That's why we're calling it major 9. And then we've got the 9th note of the scale, aka the 2nd note of the scale, same thing, on the 5th fret of the B string. Okay, so that is a D major 9 chord, but every single major 9 chord in the book. Okay, now let's borrow a page out of the Stevie Ray Vaughan playbook. It's going to be this really cool major 7 add 13 chord that he uses in the song Lenny. Okay, but he does it in the key of E there. All right, so in the key of D major, we've got 5th fret A, 4th fret of the D string, the 6th fret G string, we've got the 7th fret of the B string, and the high E string 7th fret as well. Barring with the pinky here. This one's really tricky. You can kind of put this one into a separate kind of category as just being optional. Okay, so that gives us the intervals 1, 3, major 7, we have 3 again, and then we have 13, which is really just the octave of the 6th interval of the scale. So count it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can see that those are the same tones, okay? All right, so there it is, the major 7, add 13. If you can play it, try moving it around a little bit. All right, so far we have in section 2, we have that D dominant 7. We have the D9. We have the very pretty D major 9. And we have the D major 7, add 13. Okay, here's another common one, a D6 chord. Okay, this is kind of like taking an A minor chord shape, bringing it up a whole step, and putting D in the bass. Okay, so I have my pinky on the 5th fret of the A string, playing the root note or the 1. I've got my middle finger on the 4th fret of the D string, that's my major 3rd, and I have my ring finger on the 4th fret G string, playing the 6th interval. And then right here, on the B string 3rd fret, we have another root note or 1. Okay, you put those together and we have a D6 chord. Okay, so far you have, of these major or consonant varieties, the D7 in its C shape, the very bluesy D9, the very smooth D major 9, the D major 7 add 13, and the D6 chord. Now let's learn one more. We're gonna get the D6 add 9 down. So very, very similar. Love this chord shape. I've got the 5th fret of the A string, 4th fret D, 4th fret G, and the 5th frets of the B string and the high E string. Notice that my index finger is barring across the D string and the G string to create this D6 add 9 chord. Okay, so that's all of the major or consonant varieties I want to show you today. Let's go through them one more time. D7, D9, D major 9, D major 7 add 13, D6, and D6 add 9. Okay, very good everybody. Now moving on to some minor or dissonant varieties. Here, we're going to learn how to play the minor 7 chord as a jazz blues grip. We're going to learn how to turn it into a minor 9. We're going to learn the full diminished or the diminished 7 chord, same thing. And we're going to learn the half diminished variety before learning the very intense augmented variety. Okay, so that first chord was a D minor 7 chord shape. Grabbing the 1, the minor 3rd, the dominant 7, and the minor 3rd again. This is a little bit of a stretch. I have my middle finger on the 5th fret of the A string, playing that root note. Then my index finger is on the 3rd fret of the D string. That's the minor 3rd, because if I play my major scale, find the 3rd note, and then flat it, I can find that minor 3rd there. All right, next we need the flatted 7 to turn this into a minor 7 chord shape. Then it doesn't hurt to add in another minor 3rd, which you should recognize on the 6th fret of the B string. Really great chord for a little bit of bossa. Okay, just changing that root up and down, A string to E string. Great little trick there for this minor 7 chord shape. Okay, on to the next shape, a D minor 9. Simply take the pinky note and bring it down 1/2 step. Okay, for a D minor 9 chord, and every single minor 9 chord in the book. All right, now moving on to the very, very intense D diminished 7, or a full diminished chord, same thing. So this chord consists of the 1, the flatted 5th, which is why it sounds so intense. In music, they call this the devil's interval, or the tritone. And we're also going to have the double flat 7, which is also known as the 6th interval of the scale. All right, and then finally, we're gonna have the minor 3rd. So this is minor. Okay, D diminished 7. That's the 5th fret of the A string, 6th fret of the D string, the 4th fret G, and the 6th fret of the B string. Okay, one more time. Every single diminished chord in the book. Sounds amazing when you pair it next to a major 7 chord shape up a 1/2 step. All right, so many different combinations of these chords you can use from key to key. Okay, so far you have the minor 7, the minor 9, and the full diminished. All right, now moving on to the half diminished. I call this one the zigzag chord, just because of the position of the fingers. I've got the 5th fret of the A string, the 6th fret D, 5th fret G string, and the 6th fret of the B string. Index, ring finger, middle finger, pinky, performing the 1, the flatted 5th, the dominant 7, and also the flat 3rd or minor 3rd, right there on the B string. Okay, now this chord is also sometimes referred to as a minor 7 flat 5 chord. Okay, but you can call it half diminished. All right, so we have the minor 7, the minor 9, the full diminished, and the half diminished. All right, now one last chord for today's session, the very powerful augmented chord, rooted off of the A string. Okay, so here we have the 1, we have the major 3rd, we have the augmented or raised 5th or sharpened 5th, and we have the 1 again. Okay, so that is the anatomy of an augmented chord. The 5th fret of the A string, the 4th fret D string, and then the index fingers barring across, the G string and B string 3rd fret. For every single augmented chord shape, just as a quick tip, it's very, very common and popular to apply this to the 5th scale degree in the key that you're working in. So if you're playing in the key of D major, okay, you can always apply this to the key of A. All right, so that's the 12th fret position with this chord for something that will sound a lot like Oh Darlin' by the Beatles. Okay, so that's all of those minor or dissonant varieties. Let's review. We've got the minor 7, the minor 9, we have the full diminished, we have the half diminished, and we have the very powerful augmented chord. You put them all together and we can have a very nice little progression here. We can have D major 7, we can have D sharp diminished, we can have E minor 7 or E minor 9, and we can have A augmented. Put them together and we have okay, and of course on that 5th you can also put the dominant 7 if you're not ready to kind of do that little cliffhanger there. So maybe the second go around. Okay, so take this nice and slow, start building that muscle memory, and remember, don't put too much pressure on yourself. It's never wise to over-diversify your practice. So just add a couple of these chords into your arsenal at a time, and I recommend also seeing if you can work them into your own original compositions. That's a great way to improve your retention, as that would be applied learning rather than passive learning. I hope you enjoyed this. Have a great week of practice. Alright friends, thanks so much for checking out this rhythm guitar tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. As always, big thanks to my supporters at patreon.com/swiftlessons. Hope you're enjoying all those extra resources. And thanks to you guys, I got many more lessons coming up. So keep checking in, please subscribe, please share. This is Rob at Swift Guitar Lessons in Philadelphia, saying happy picking.